Hello and welcome to the top 10 tips for CFA exam success. My name is Rob Thakur. I'm one of the CFA instructors here at Fitch Learning. Personally, I've been teaching the CFA program for the past 15 years now, so I should know by now what it takes to get through these exams. This recording is going to focus on CFA Level 1. If you are looking at Level 2 or Level 3, check out the relevant web pages on our website, fitchlearning.com. Now, I'd like to go through these tips in a manner where it's going to be useful for you whether you are at the start of your studies or maybe the final week of your studies before the exam. You should still find these tips useful. So let's look at these top 10 tips, and we'll start off with top tip number 1, which is know all the relevant functions on the official CFA exam calculator. Now that sounds a bit obvious, but it's amazing how many people don't know all the functions that they need to know for the exam, which will save you on time. It'll just make you much more efficient and get you through those exam questions. The official calculator, if you're not aware, is the Texas Instruments BA2+. This is going to be your friend for your study time all the way through. You want to make sure you know this intimately and make sure you can use all the functions that are relevant for the exam. Now that's not all the functions on the calculator, it's certain functions. One thing that you want to make sure that you can use on this before you even get into the functions is make sure that you know how to set the format on the calculator. You can get into the format going second decimal point, that will access the format, and that's important. You want to make sure that you've got the right settings on your calculator even before you use the functions. Two key settings: make sure that you've got the setting on AOS mode rather than CHN mode. If you take out the packaging, it will be on CHN mode. You don't want it on that. You want it on AOS mode. Now the reason why it is AOS mode, it covers the BODMAS rules. I don't know if you're familiar with BODMAS, but that's brackets, order, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. And it means that it goes through, when it works out the calculations for numerical calculations, it will do it in the right order. It will do the multiplication division first before the addition subtraction. And that just means you don't need to put loads of brackets around all these detailed calculations. It'll make it much more straightforward. Another format setting you want it on is in terms of decimal places. Now again, when you take the calculator out of the packaging, it's set on 2 decimal places. And that just isn't enough for all of the questions. You might want 4 decimal places, even more. So my advice would be set it on 9 decimal places. Now that doesn't put up 9 decimal places necessarily. That puts up as many decimal places as there are. So if there's 3, it'll put up 3. If there's 5, it will put up 5. And it gets rid of all those annoying zeros. You know, if you put it on, I don't know, let's say 4 decimal places, you get the 4 zeros coming after the decimal point. It gets rid of that and it just puts up the number with the decimal places for each calculation. Now that's just a couple of format tips that you want. In terms of functions, got to make sure you can use the TVM, the NPV, IRR, data, stats, interest rate conversion, the amortization function, the bond function. All of those are a must-know set of functions. And if you want to know how to use those, if some of those aren't familiar, then again, check out our website. We've got free resources on there, including some calculator videos that will take you through some of those functions. So make sure you do use those. Top tip number 2, do not leave question practice towards the end of your studies. Again, classic mistake I see people. Every time I hear the people saying, oh yeah, I'll leave the mock exams, the question practice in the final month. That's way too late. You want to start practicing questions from ideally day 1, and there's nothing to stop you. You could do questions after every single reading within the CFA curriculum and do that. Finish one of the readings, 4 or 5 pages, let's say, then get stuck in, do some questions. Sure, when you get to the final month, do a lot more questions, a lot more mock exams, but there's nothing to stop you doing practice questions from day 1 onwards. And that's how our online portal is structured. Our CFA online portal is structured in the sense that you look at some readings, watch a instructor recording, something like this, and then you get stuck into some practice questions. And we also set hurdle tests. These are tests, exam standard tests, that are set at every single study session. So once you complete each session, here are some exam standard questions to practice, gauge how you're doing to make sure you keep on track all the way. So make sure you practice questions all the way through your studies. Tip number 3, make sure you know how a topic is tested. That's really important. A lot of people do make the mistake of maybe looking at the calculations when actually it's going to be tested as a narrative question, or vice versa. Now, the way you can tell is by looking at the LOSs, the learning outcome statements. So in your curriculum books, you'll have the learning outcome statements, the LOSs outlined there, and it's the command words you want to have a look at. Does it say calculate, compute? Then sure, expect a calculation type numerical question to come up. But actually if the LOS says define, describe, distinguish, compare, then you should really be thinking more narrative type questions, interpreting questions. General rule, expect for the whole exam actually more narrative questions than numerical calculation type questions. That's often the case. Expect that in the exam and make sure that's how you study towards it. Don't just get focused on the calculations. Make sure you look at the narrative, interpretive types of questions as well. Tip number 4, don't waste time on learning formulae that you know isn't going to come up. Now, how do you know that? It's the LOSs again, the learning outcome statements. So if they do say calculate, as we said, sure, compute, yeah. If they say define, distinguish, compare, contrast, then it's not going to come up as a calculation. I'll give you one example. When you look at your quantitative methods, you'll see kurtosis in there. Now, I don't know if you know about kurtosis, but kurtosis looks at the shape of the distribution. Not in the sense of the symmetry, that would be skewness. Kurtosis actually looks at the shape in terms of the tails and how peaked the distribution is. So you have leptokurtic distributions and platykurtic distributions. Now, leptokurtic distributions, compared to a normal distribution, a bell-shaped curve, a leptokurtic distribution actually has fatter tails than a normal distribution. Okay, it is thinner and more peaked than a normal distribution, but the key to identifying a leptokurtic distribution is by looking at the tails. So a fatter tails in a distribution than a normal distribution would be leptokurtic. If it's thinner tails compared to a normal distribution, then it's platykurtic. Now, in terms of calculating this, you can calculate it. There are formulae there in the curriculum books, in the CFA books. And they're nasty looking formulae if you look at them. And you do get some people memorizing those formulae. However, if you look at the learning outcome statement, it says words like compare, contrast, distinguish in terms of skewness and kurtosis. So that's telling you, actually, don't learn the formula. It's not going to come up as a calculation. It's going to be a narrative, interpret type of question. So make sure, again, you look at the LOSs. Only look to know the formulae where it talks about calculating, computing, analysing possibly. Then you're thinking, right, okay, calculation type questions for those. Tip number 5, do make use of the CFA programme curriculum books. Again, the amount of people I hear say, oh, I'm not going to use the underlying CFA books, I'm going to use a prep provider revision guides or prep provider study notes. Now sure, there's some really good prep providers out there, including ourselves, who provide some great study materials, some study notes, some revision aids. Yeah, we do that as well at Fitch Learning. But we would still recommend that you still utilise the underlying curriculum books. Why? Because after all, the CFA Institute who wrote the exam wrote those books. So you can't get anything better than the underlying books in terms of your Bible, and that's how you should view it. That's your Bible to pass in the exam. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to have necessarily enough time to read the underlying books. They are very detailed, and it's certainly one of the key, hurdles to trying to pass this exam is trying to get through the books. But there's quite a few bits you can use in there. If nothing else, make sure you attempt all the questions in the CFA curriculum books. You know, all the end of chapter questions, you've got to make sure you do. After all, as I said, they're coming from the institute, they write the exam, got to make sure you do those as a bare minimum. And then, if you're short of time, use them as a reference. Let's say you want to look at, let's say, leasing, and you're not sure to what extent that it could be tested. Well, if it's not in the CFA curriculum books, it can't come up in the exam. And that's your ultimate source. That can tell you what could get tested, how far could they test it, and you use it as a reference. You know, if there's some areas that you want more understanding, use the CFA curriculum books as a reference. So just to summarise there, I wouldn't say read it cover to cover unless you've got a lot of time on your hands, but certainly use it for question practice with the end of chapter questions and as a reference, looking at those areas that you need more help on or that you want to see, well, how far could they possibly push you in the exam? Okay, let's move on to top tip number 6. Do not study the curriculum in study session order. Now, why not? Well, the CFA Institute outlined the curriculum in just a random order. Yeah, study session 1 happens to be ethics, and study session 18 happens to be portfolio management. But there's no rhyme or reason in terms of the order that the study sessions are listed out, and therefore no reason why you should do it in study session order. There's actually a much more logical order to studying the study sessions. We would recommend actually starting with quantitative methods. Why? Because that is the foundation to a lot of the other topics. For instance, quantitative methods will help you with the asset classes, so fixed income, equity, derivatives, alternatives. It'll also help you with portfolio management, corporate finance, just to name some of the topics. So start with quants, get that under your belt, make sure you're comfortable with all the calculator functions as well. Then I would move on to financial reporting and analysis. The reason why it's such an important topic, particularly at CFA level 1. It's 20% of the syllabus. It tends to be one of the more challenging areas. Speak to your predecessors, they'll say accounts, yeah, that's the one I struggle with the most. So hit that hard first. Hit that early on. Financial reporting analysis, 4 key study sessions, get that under your belt earlier rather than later. Then it makes sense to move on to the asset classes, fixed income, equity, derivatives and alternatives, and then leave more of the sort of wordy type topics later on in your studies. For example, economics and ethics. Very few calculations, much more narrative. Look to get that into your mindset, into your study time later on in your studies. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mean leave it to the last week. That's what some people do, that's way too late. But in the last month or so, then start moving towards economics and ethics and those more narrative type subjects. Top tip number 7, don't spend too much time on the tricky areas. It's a natural thing to do. You go, okay, right, here's a tricky area. I'm going to spend lots of time in it at the expense of looking at a lot of the easier areas that will come up in the exam. And that's how the exam will be. You'll get the majority of the questions being fairly straightforward. You'll get some questions being challenging. You'll get a small percentage of questions being downright tough. And the human nature is to spend all the time on those really tough areas, the expense of bagging, making sure that you get all those easy marks on the relatively easier or moderate topics or areas. So sure, look at the tricky areas, try and get to grips with it, but don't spend an overly generous amount of time on those tricky areas at the expense of the more easier areas. You've got to get a balance. So cover the tricky areas, but don't spend too much time on them. Tip number 8 is a key one. Question practice is the key to reduce that time pressure in the exam. Again, feedback we get, I've been teaching this for the past 15 years, I'll hear people in the same exam, I'd say the majority saying, oh, it's really tough on time, really struggling. But also a fair minority saying, actually, I find it quite easy in the exam. And they're all taking the same exam, it's the same sitting. So what causes that difference? I say the key reason that causes a difference in time pressure is how you approach the questions and how you practice the questions. Again, I'd say those who are practicing questions towards the latter end of their studies, maybe in the final month or so, and haven't really done that much question practice earlier on, will struggle with the time. Also, those who practice questions but don't do it to the time pressure. What you really should be thinking is, right, 10 questions, it's 1.5 minutes per question, that's 15 minutes, get your time set, and then off you go and look to do those 10 questions in the 15 minutes. It's no good doing 10 questions in half an hour. You're going to blow it on the day. You've got to be able to do those questions, whatever it is, 10 questions, let's say, in the time allocation of 15 minutes. Or I've got 20 questions here, half an hour, off you go. And start doing that drill early on in your studies. Again, there's nothing to stop you doing it in the first month of your studies, not just in the final month of your studies. So make sure you do that. If you do that, time pressure will disappear in the exam. Personally, I was finding actually I was doing the exams in 2 hours rather than 3 hours. And it's not, I wasn't doing anything special. All I was doing is making sure I was going through the drill of practicing questions all the way through my study time. 10 questions, 15 minutes, off I go, all the way from week 1 rather than leaving it to the final week. Okay, top tip number 9. Do be realistic on the time it will take you to get through the curriculum, because it will take you longer than you would envisage. Now, why is that the case? It's quantity, the amount of quantity that you need to get through. There's a significant amount. But also, you may underestimate some of the topics in terms of time it takes to get through. I'll tell you my experience. For example, I'd already done a chartered accountancy qualification before I did the CFA exams. I'd done economics and econometrics at university, so that covered me on the quants as well. I'd worked in fixed income derivatives, corporate finance. So I was going in there thinking, all right, I've covered quite a lot of these topics previously. But even then, I found I had to do quite a bit of study time on those areas, even though I've covered them before in previous exams and also in the industry knowledge that I have. And the reason why is because the devil is in the detail. The CFA Institute like to test, or do test, the curriculum as it is stated in their curriculum books. And that may mean that you need to maybe change the way you have learnt something previously to the way the author in the CFA curriculum book tests it. I'll give you one example. For example, price elasticity of demand. Now, I did this at school and at university as well, and we always did it based on an initial point, so an initial quantity and an initial price. Well, actually, the CFA Institute books do it differently. They actually base it on an average price between 2 points and an average quantity. So that was different to the way I did it at school. Now, it may be different to you in terms of how you've done it, may be the same. You need to check that. So you need to go through that material, even if you covered the topic before, and make sure you learn it the way they'll test it in the exam. Finally, top tip 10 on the actual exam day is to say, but don't panic. Now, the reason why I say that is remember that the exam is relatively marked. So that means they don't set a fixed pass mark for each exam sitting. It varies. And that means if it's maybe a particularly tough exam that you're sitting relative to previous years, that they'll actually bring the pass mark down. Yeah? So in terms of how many you need to get right, it'll be a lower level than maybe in a sitting when the exam was relatively easier. You probably need a higher pass mark to get through. So always bear that in mind. If you're finding it tough, everyone else is. And it may be the case that you only need to get, 62, 63% to get through. So bear that in mind. Don't give up. Again, the amount of people are here who only went through the morning exam, didn't turn up for the afternoon exam, massive mistake. You've got to make sure you're there for the full duration. The exam as a whole, they don't make a distinction between the morning and afternoon, just collate it all. So you want to be there for the whole duration. You want to make sure that you're there for the full day. So I hope you found that useful. Far more information on this. I've only scratched the surface, but if you want to know more top tips, more useful study resources, then we've got a lot of free content on our website there, fitchlearning.com. See there, we'll get you access to this free content. We've got instructor recordings, practice questions and answers. We've got calculator guide videos. So have a look on our website, get access to this free study resources, and that'll help you get through the exam. Here's our contact details. Get in touch. As you can see, we are a global organisation. We have offices in London, New York, Singapore and Dubai. We cover all the regions. Make sure you get in touch. We have a really sophisticated online study tool, as I mentioned. Our online study portal also has a mobile app integrated into it, so that allows you to work offline, wherever you are, even if you don't have Wi-Fi access, and allows you to have that support all the way through your study time. Okay, well, thank you very much. Hope you found that of use. Get in touch. You've got our contact details. Look on our website, and all the very best for your studies, your future studies with the CFA programme.